Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. I've got some questions for Bobby Kennedy. Yes, RFK Jr. did his own State of the Union address following or as a response to the guy that's sitting in the White House right now. And there are some things that need clarifying. So why don't you hop on over with me here? And we are going to take a look at his Substack. And this came out yesterday. It says, How I See the State of Our Union. And he said, today I released a video on how I see the state of our union. My message is what we once were, we can be again. So here you have it. There's the transcript. And I want to show you that over at my own Substack, which is Substack. It's peggyhall.substack.com. And you'll see that I've got dozens and dozens of broadcasts here, of posts here for you to read. And tomorrow I will have my written comments for you that I'm going to share with you right now. So I'm analyzing Bobby Kennedy's comments, and I've got some questions and I would like some clarification. So this is just an open request, I guess, to RFK Jr. to clarify himself on some of these points. So I'm going to read to you actually his transcript. This is what he said. He said, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'm running as an independent candidate for president of the United States. He says, I grew up in an America that seemed to have achieved its promise as an exemplary nation, modern democracy. I'm just going to let that hang there for a moment, has spread from one nation, ours in 1776, to 6 nations by 1865 and to 190 by the 1960s. All right, here are my comments. And again, you can get this in a written format tomorrow, and that is at peggyhall.substack.com. I would love for you to share this information and to analyze it for yourself. So my comments are, we are a constitutional republic. We are not a democracy. Bobby, please get your facts straight and stop promoting this idea of America as a democracy. So he says this in the very opening paragraph, the very second paragraph of the very second sentence in his opening paragraph. Starts right out with modern democracy. No, we are not. We are a constitutional republic, and I've spoken at length on the differences. We are not ruled by majority. We have limits by the Constitution. These limits are being eradicated as we speak, with laws being passed that are anti-Constitution, that are against the Constitution. But the Constitution is where the buck stops. And we, the people, have entered into this contract with those that we give consent to govern us, and we can withdraw that consent. But that comes from the contract of the Constitution. So one of my Healthy Americans actually said, Peggy, I asked him in person at an event where he was, I said, why are you calling it a democracy when we are a constitutional republic? And the person that asked this said that Bobby replied and said, well, most people don't know the difference. So, it's no biggie. It's a biggie. It is the biggiest of the biggies, because that is the premise of our country and our political system. And it's a promise basically as well, and a contract. And democracy is a code word for socialism and other isms like totalitarianism. And I don't care for it. And I don't care for this misdirection, Bobby. So please get the record straight. He goes on to say, we had become a city on the hill, the city on the hill. We were a moral authority around the globe. And I don't like that he's putting it in the past tense. We still are a moral authority around the globe. So I don't like this idea that, all of that is in the past. That's just my own comments. He says, our government institutions, our Congress, the court, the regulatory agencies, I'm going to come back to that, and even the American press were renowned for their integrity, and they were revered worldwide. Okay, my comments. You're telling me that the CDC and the FDA and the EPA and other regulatory agencies, which, by the way, are also unconstitutional, no one revered the CDC. No one around the world has revered the EPA and the FDA. So I don't care for this promoting, number one, of a false premise. Where is your evidence that our regulatory agencies were renowned for their integrity? That's the statement he made. So no, they were not known for their integrity. So my question, Bobby, why are you pushing people to trust these agencies? It's a theme that I have seen, Bobby, in your comments again and again. It's notably in your interview with uh, Alan Dershowitz when you were having a debate about whether or not the government could force you to become a human pincushion. And you said that your number one job, that the number one thing that you would do and that the government needs to do is to restore the people's trust in these regulatory agencies. And apparently that's been your message. And I refute that message. No, we need to educate people that they have rights that cannot be trampled upon by these agencies. That's where I stand. So I reject that statement of yours as well. He goes on to say, nations wanted our American leadership. And I refute that as well. Many probably still do. They knew the difference between leadership and bullying. Now, I'm going to make another comment that RFK seems to be fixated on the word bullying. And I wondered if he was bullied as a child. And if you do a very quick internet search, as I did, in fact, let me bring that up for you. I did a quick internet search with his name and the word bully or bullying because I've noticed this is a pattern that he does a lot, where he will call someone else a bully and then he will just use that word again and again. And I think that, in my opinion, is a manipulative approach because it's a very emotional word. Probably many of us, were bullied or experienced that or witnessed it happening to others, and that can elicit an emotional response. And what's interesting is that others called him a bully. So RFK and the word bully and bullying are very linked. And let me share with you just a quick giggle search. I do giggle because it's so funny. So here we have in 2023, somebody was writing an article on Kennedy, and the author said he felt bullied by Kennedy and he was insulted because he tried to fact check many of his speculative and debunked theories. And here it is again. He tried to bully another blogger and this is that story from Vanity Fair describing him as a charmless bully in person. And then Robert Kennedy says that Trump is a bully and I don't like bullies. So he uses that word again and again and again. And RFK Jr. was bullied from speaking as Moms for Liberty. So the other thing that was interesting is I have a Healthy American that was on a Zoom call with Bobby Kennedy related to the cocktails. And as a mom of a child that has been irreparably harmed by those cocktails before the mom knew better, she called him out and said, why are you always talking about safety testing, especially for the childhood cocktails? Who are these going to be tested on? Animal tests? They can't even be extrapolated to humans. And that's been debunked many times that, animal studies actually are the same as humans. If that's the case, why am I not supposed to feed my dog avocados, but I can eat avocados? And there are many examples of that. But what happened is in this Zoom, he said that she was bullying him by asking a question as to why he never calls for the repeal of the 1986 Act, which gave liability to these cocktail companies, and why he continues to call for these childhood cocktail tests instead of saying, hey, we can never make poison safe. And she was called a bully. So this concept of Bobby Kennedy and using the word bully doesn't sit well with me. Maybe it strikes you differently. So anyhow, let me go back to his comments. And he says that nations knew the difference between leadership and bullying, which is something our current leaders seem to have forgotten. We were the template of liberty, proof that for a country to thrive, its people must be free. I agree with that. Free to speak, free to worship, free to build great companies, free to start small businesses. Bravo. I agree 100%, Bobby. We were the freest country in the world. I don't like that he's using it in the past tense. And by no coincidence, also the most prosperous. And I will give my own comment that only when there is limited government and respect for individual freedom can we be prosperous and free. So I am not in favor of big government. And face it, he's a Kennedy. He's a big government guy. There's no getting around it. All right. He goes on to say, working Americans could provide for their families on a single salary. He's speaking in the past. They could buy a home, raise a family, save for retirement without mountains of debt. This is true. I agree with it. We made the best music. We made the best movies. We made gold standard automobiles that everybody in the world wanted. We made blue jeans. So we're not doing that anymore. I don't like this It's a passive aggressive put down on Americans, and I don't care for it. He goes on to say, we reconstructed Europe. Wait for it. He says, we put men on the moon. I'm just going to let that hang there a little bit. My savvy, sophisticated, healthy Americans know the truth about that story. And then he goes on to say, and it's funny that he said that because it was when his uncle was in office. So yeah, there's a lot of funny business that is surrounding all of that. He goes on to say, we had the world's healthiest, best educated children. All right. That may be true or it may not be true. I don't know what evidence he is using because he doesn't give any evidence for that statement. He goes on to say, our productivity, ingenuity, and can-do spirit were the envy of the world. I dispute the fact that he's doing it in the past tense. I've spoken about the American spirit, how much I love it, the can-do attitude, the resourcefulness. Maybe he's watching my videos because it sounds like this is taken right from one of my videos. The only difference is he's using it in the past tense. And while I'm not in favor of our current government, and I'm certainly not in favor of the restrictions, the regulations, and all of that big government politicians like, I would not put this in the past tense. He goes on to say, we had confidence in our strength, our capacity, and the limitless potential of our country. So again, Bobby, why the past tense? Why are you drawing this dire, negative, foreboding image? I find it very emotionally manipulative. All right, he goes on to say, yeah, we had serious racial and environmental problems, but in the heady days of my youth, so I guess that would have been the 60s. I'm not quite sure. The environmental movement, yes, and the civil rights movement were picking up steam. My father and some of his allies were fighting to eliminate the last pockets of hunger in Appalachia, in the Mississippi Delta, and on the Indian reservations. That's awesome. Bravo. I applaud that. And we became, for the first time, are you ready, everybody? A true constitutional democracy. He actually put those two words together. It's a discordant phrase. We are not a constitutional democracy. And you know, Bobby, I don't even want to cut you any slack here. I am going to say shame on you. Why did you do that? Why did you put that in your statement? We're not a constitutional democracy. In fact, that's not in our founding documents. You are manipulating either intentionally or ignorantly. And you don't appear to be ignorant. I think you are educated. So I can only see this as an intentional deception. Would you please explain yourself? We're not a constitutional democracy. Why do you keep saying the word democracy? Maybe you've been watching Tucker Carlson too long because he's always talking about democracy. And it's wrong, all right? It is an incremental way of bringing people along to make them think that we are a democracy, and that is basically socialism. It's the code word for it. So please educate yourself. Why can't you bring yourself to say constitutional republic? Now, I'm going to mark this day of airing this broadcast, and I'm going to be listening to your upcoming speeches, and I want to hear you very clearly state. I'm not going to ask you for an apology. That might be pushing a little too far, but you do need to start calling this country what it is, a constitutional republic. All right. I think we've settled that now. Many people have pointed out your perpetual ignorance or intentional deception on this. So it's time to let it go. People are on to it. He goes on to say, other countries aspired to be like us, and our children grew up proud of their passport, proud of their flag. And Bobby, many still are, those who understand the true principles that our country was founded on. And yes, we have fallen short in many areas, but I don't like that you're putting this in the past tense. He goes on to say, my uncle, President Kennedy, left us a legacy of peace and the hope of ending the arms race and winding down the Cold War. Well, speaking of arms, your uncle was the one who signed into law with great fanfare and support the Cocktail Assistance Act, whereby the federal government gave money to the states, the counties, the cities, the schools, basically, to have these widespread cocktails be injected into children. Why don't you ever mention that? He left us a legacy of government-inflicted cocktails, Bobby. You need to own it. And you need to call to repeal the government money that goes to these states that fund these horrible cocktails. That's the only way I can put it. He goes on to say, those were the traditions of freedom, prosperity, and peace that my father, my uncle, and Martin Luther King Jr. were striving to protect and advance. I think it's interesting that he slips in Martin Luther King Jr. That's kind of hard for me to say, as though somehow he personally is associated with him. That it's one of those marketing techniques that people do. It's like association, when you trot out these other names. That may or may not have been his intention, but it is an association. He said, in half a century since their deaths, we've lost touch with that vision for our country. I don't think so. What do you think we are all fighting for? Freedom and prosperity and peace. He goes on to say, I want to tell you right now that we can still restore that America, the America that almost was and yet may be. I don't understand that statement either. It almost was, but we have to start by being honest with ourselves. Neither my uncle nor my father, again, that association, so we'll think that he's just like JFK, would recognize the version of America that we have today. And that's true. We've become a nation of chronic illness, of violence, of loneliness, depression, division, and poverty. He says our great cities are becoming tent encampments, modern day Hoovervilles filled with undocumented immigrants. Let me back up a little bit. Our great cities are becoming tent encampments. Are the cities that are run by Democrats, Bobby? Look at the data. It's the cities and the states that are run primarily by Democrats, by liberals, by the left that are having these problems. Just own it, okay? Now that you're an independent, you can own it. He goes on to say, they're filled with undocumented immigrants. Is that really the right word, everybody? You know what came to mind for me? Foreign criminals. Yeah, because they're criminals because they broke the law by coming here from other countries, which makes them foreign. So YouTube, you want to have a debate about these facts? Bring it. All right, let's continue, shall we? He said, dispossessed Americans and people living in their cars plagued by mental illness and addiction and despair. Okay, not every person living in their car is plagued by mental illness and addiction and despair. Maybe that was just grammatically awkward in your sentence, but some of them are, not all of them. We have healthy Americans that have chosen to live healthy and free from paying rent and mortgages and all that stuff. Anyway, the bigger picture is that what we're seeing are the results of the liberal leftist failed policies. Go on to continue. He says, our border has come under the control of criminal drug cartels that traffic in desolation, in fentanyl and methamphetamine. And I agree with him on that. And in busloads of desperate human beings. But these are the leftist policies that have resulted in that. You've got to own it. He says our children are drowning in a crisis of alienation, of dispossession, and of complete disconnection from their communities. Well, that's quite a broad generalization. I'm sure that does happen in some areas, but I can point to many upstanding families and communities and children that are not doing that. He said we've lost far more of our young people to drugs in the last decade than in the 20-year Vietnam War. Now, that may be true, but we've lost far more young people who were killed as developing babies in the womb. And you tolerate that, Bobby, don't you? You're not calling. You say that it's tragic. Well, then why aren't you standing against it? You believe you're on the opposite end of the spectrum as far as I am regarding the sanctity of life and how every life, regardless of the stage of development, has a right to that life in dignity, respect. It's sacred. And so I'm just pointing that out. If you want to talk about how many people have been killed, you're missing the bigger picture there. We've printed 9 centuries worth of money in little over a decade and spent $8 trillion on regime change wars. That's true. I agree with you. I don't know if the numbers are true, but I'll take your word for it. Those wars have made America less safe, our country less strong. I don't know about that. And the world far less stable while sending prices through the roof as our infrastructure falls apart. Yes, absolutely. There is runaway inflation from these horrible policies. I agree with you. He says tens of millions of young Americans no longer even dream of owning their own home or even on going on vacation. What happened to America, the land of opportunity where you could be sure that if you worked hard and played by the rules that you would have a decent life? What happened, Bobby? Really? I know you know the answer to that. The Democrat, right? You love your democracy. The Democrat socialist policies are what happened to America. These policies that you favor and would like to promote. He goes on. All the new wealth of the last generation has gone to billionaires. I'm speechless. What are you even talking about? I don't understand that statement. Where's your evidence for that? You are being divisive. You are dividing billionaires who actually, many, I know some billionaires, all right, and they earned that money honestly through hard work, through all that ingenuity that you were applauding a moment ago with the American dream and the free economy. Why are you demonizing billionaires? Shame on you, Bobby. You probably are a billionaire yourself or your family wealth. So what is this division and fomenting this hatred and envy of billionaires? I wish that everybody would become a billionaire. That's what we should be promoting. He said all the new wealth of the last generation has gone to the billionaires. Where's your evidence for that? And to transnational corporations. This statement foments the division that you say you are against, and you have no evidence for it. He goes on, our tattered middle class. All right, first of all, there's no such thing as a middle class. We do not have classes in our society. We are a classless society. We are not like India that has a caste system, which I know they're trying to say they don't have, but they do. We're not like England, which you're born into royalty or something. We don't have a middle class. We may have people that are earning the middle income range of most people. I do not care for putting people into categories of middle class, working class, upper class, elite. No, we're all human beings with equal value. I do not care for this at all. He goes on to say, our infrastructure and our industry have been hollowed out from the inside. Instead of promise, we've left our kids sick and drowning in debt. The public debt has gone from about 5 trillion under Bush to 34 trillion today, and US household debt is at a record high of 17.3 trillion. I'm going to trust you on your numbers, but I don't care for the demonizing of those who are contributing to society. And yes, there are criminal billionaires and there are criminal homeless people, and there are upstanding billionaires and there are upstanding homeless people. And I do not care for the generalizations and the slander of those who are employing people. Most of these billionaires are own companies. And that's a topic for another day, but I need to point it out, Bobby. That is a low blow. And yeah, what do you have to say for yourself about that? His next paragraph, if you include discouraged workers, our true unemployment rate is 23%. Discouraged workers? How do you measure discouraged workers? Are you saying they're not employed or they're employed and they don't like their job? I mean, I've had lots of jobs and I didn't like the job, but I earned money and it was honest. So I don't understand that statement either. Young parents face housing, grocery, and childcare costs that are unaffordable. Yeah, childcare should be done by the parents who have the children, in my view. But I agree with you that there are costs that are skyrocketing. Too many Americans are living bleak and hopeless lives, dreading one medical emergency or the car repair that will tip them over the edge into homelessness. Wow, fear-mongering much, Bobby? Negative, hopeless comments here? He goes on, we ranked 40th globally in our people's health and wellness. Out of the richest countries in the world, the United States is 35th in child poverty rates, just above Mexico. We rank 36th in literacy, 45th in press freedom. We have one of the highest cancer rates in the world. I don't know what that has to do with politics. Our life expectancy now ranks 59th according to the World Bank. The World Bank. That's right behind Algeria, which spends less than 1/30th per capita of what we spend. Well, by that, indicator, we shouldn't be spending all that money on healthcare then, should we, Bobby? Even these grim figures hide the full picture of our dire healthcare crisis. Are you hearing those emotionally charged words, friends? I don't care for that. That's politics and spinning. I reject it. He says, we now have the worst health outcomes in the rich world, the highest maternal mortality rates. Yes, very high maternal mortality rates, especially when they're being ripped limb to limb from the womb, Bobby. The highest number of gun bang deaths per capita. Well, you know what, Bobby? That's in the Democrat-run cities with the highest level of bang illegal regulations. So how do you like them apples? If you're going to be making these statements, own the fact that it's policies like yours that you support with taking away the Second Amendment rights, and that's what leads to that. There have been countless studies that have linked that together. He said the highest number of teen pregnancies. Well, no problem. Just go to the, local Planned Parenthood for that. That's what you seem to be in favor of. We lead the world in obesity and chronic disease. According to the CDC, there you go, friends. He's trotting out the regulatory agencies that we should trust. That's his job, is to restore trust. I don't know how you can restore it when there never was. According to the CDC, 60% of Americans have at least one chronic condition. When my uncle was president, only 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Well, what do we even do with that statement? Your uncle was responsible for people not having disease? I don't even understand what that means. You see, friends, this is a very poor on the logic and facts scale. And I don't care for this referencing the CDC as if it's an agency to be respected. He goes on, all of these plights fall heaviest on our young people. I'm going to leave a couple of paragraphs that I don't have comments on because I don't want this to run too long. So he does have a couple of paragraphs that I agree with, where he says we were once a free and thriving nation, healthiest and strongest in the world. I see profound determination among Americans to heal. So I agree. He said, we have some of the world's most depleted agricultural soils, but some of the world's most innovative and energetic regenerative farmers. Yes, I love that. We have serious economic problems. We have the brightest and most ambitious entrepreneurs. Bravo. I love it. That's the kind of language I would love to hear more of. He had a couple of paragraphs like that. This is kind of long, so let me just wrap up. And a couple of points I wanted to bring up is he said, we face hunger and homelessness, yet we meet it with the highest philanthropic rates in the world. Then why do you favor government intrusion and dependence if it's the individuals that are offering the kindness and compassion and money to help with these issues? Okay, so he goes on, and it is quite long. You can read all of this over at my Substack, peggyhall.substack.com. At the end of his State of the Union, he says, that's the State of the Union I want to bring to you today. It's a nation that hungers to heal. It's a nation ready to face reality, to rebuild, to end the forever foreign wars. Well, Bobby, you support what Israel is doing to the innocent civilians in Gaza, don't you? How can you be against war and in favor of it at the same time? It's inconsistent. He finishes by saying, we want to clean out the corrupt Washington establishment and to turn again toward peace, freedom, good health, and prosperity. When we unite in that vision, we're going to be unstoppable. Thank you, and God bless you. So I think the last statements are fine. I agree with that. I just wanted to give you my analysis, since that's why you tune in to this show, is you'd like to hear my take on these things. And since that is timely information, I wanted to bring it to you. All right, everybody, I appreciate you being on board. I look forward to seeing you in an upcoming video. I want to thank all of you for being on board. I want to thank God for this gift of life. May we use it to honor him and to stand for truth and freedom. See you soon, everybody.